They called her null, empty, a mistake branded into flesh. In the claiming hall where alphas hunted for mates, Varela Kane stood invisible, until the doors exploded and the Alpha King himself walked in. His eyes found her in a crowd of hundreds. 3 words shattered everything she knew. I found you. But this isn't a fairy tale, because the king who chose her is cursed. And the girl everyone called worthless? She's the only weapon powerful enough to destroy him, or save them all. Stay until the end to see how a rejected nobody becomes the one force that changes everything. Drop a comment with your city, and let's dive in. Mossen. The hall stank of desperation and cheap perfume. Varela Kane pressed her back against the stone wall, trying to make herself smaller. It didn't work. Nothing ever worked. The brand on her left wrist burned beneath the thin fabric of her sleeve, a circle with a slash through it, the mark of the null, the mark that said she was less than human. Around her, women preened and postured. They wore their best dresses, their brightest smiles. Some had already been claimed twice, returned for being defective in ways Varela didn't understand. But even they looked at her with contempt, because at least they had something, a flicker of power, a trace of lineage, a spark that proved they belonged to the world of alphas and bonds and destiny. Varela had nothing. Move, a blonde woman hissed, shoving past her. The woman's perfume was overpowering, floral and cloying. You're blocking the light. Varela stepped aside without argument. It was easier that way. She'd learned young that fighting back only made things worse. The matrons would punish her for disrupting the peace. The other girls would corner her later, when no one was watching. And the alphas never even looked her way. The claiming hall was a massive chamber with vaulted ceilings and narrow windows that let in streams of pale morning light. Iron chandeliers hung overhead, their candles unlit. The stone floor was worn smooth by decades of footsteps, and the walls were bare except for banners bearing the crests of the 7 houses. At the far end of the room stood a raised platform where the matron superior presided, her face carved from granite and disappointment. 200 women filled the hall, 200 unclaimed, unwanted, discarded women. Some were here for the first time, still hopeful. Others had been through this ritual a dozen times, their eyes empty and their shoulders slumped. And then there was Varela, who had stood in this hall every month since her 16th birthday. 4 years, 48 claiming ceremonies, 0 interest. Positions! Matron Superior's voice cracked like a whip. The women scrambled into formation, lines of 10, arranged by house affiliation. Varela went to the back corner where the houseless and the worthless congregated. There were only 6 of them today. Last month there had been 9, but 3 had been released. That was the polite word for it, released. As if they were birds set free, not women sent to workhouses or worse. The doors at the opposite end of the hall groaned open. The alphas entered. Varela had watched this moment hundreds of times, and it never got easier. The alphas moved with a confidence that seemed built into their bones. They were tall, broad-shouldered, their eyes sharp and assessing. Some wore fine clothes, velvet jackets, polished boots, silver chains. Others came in working gear, leather and wool and the smell of sweat and horses. It didn't matter what they wore. What mattered was the power that rolled off them in waves, an invisible pressure that made the air itself feel heavier. The women straightened, smiled, tilted their heads just so, exposing their throats in the traditional gesture of availability. Varela kept her eyes down. An alpha in a burgundy coat walked past her line. He didn't even slow down. Another followed, this one younger, his gaze skimming over the women like he was shopping for fruit. A third stopped in front of the blonde who had shoved Varela earlier. He leaned in, inhaling deeply, scenting her. The woman's smile widened. He moved on. One by one, the alphas made their choices. A hand extended, a woman stepping forward, a brief exchange of words, name, house, bloodline. Then the matron superior would record the claim in her ledger and the pair would leave together through the side door. It was efficient, transactional, cold. Varela watched a girl with red hair get claimed by an alpha who looked old enough to be her grandfather. The girl's relief was palpable. Better an old alpha than no alpha at all. Better a claim than the workhouse. 20 women left. Then 30. 40. The crowd thinned. An hour passed. Then 2. Varella's feet ached. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Rations for the unclaimed were minimal, and she always gave half of hers to the younger girls. They still had hope. She didn't need to take that from them. Pathetic, someone muttered nearby. Varela didn't look to see who. By the time the sun reached its zenith, only 50 women remained. The alphas were getting pickier now, circling back for second looks, debating quietly among themselves. Varela recognized some of them, lesser lords, merchants, even a few farmers. The high-status alphas came early and left with the best prospects. What was left now were the desperate and the picky. And then there was Varela, who wasn't even a prospect. "Nulls to the front," Matron Superior called. Varela's stomach dropped. This was new. The other 5 null-marked women shuffled forward, their faces pale. Varela followed, her legs stiff and reluctant. They formed a line at the center of the hall, exposed under the high windows. The light felt like accusation. "These women bear the null mark," Matron Superior announced, her voice echoing. "No bond detected, no lineage confirmed, no power manifested. They are available for labor contracts, household service, or—" She paused, and Varela heard the cruelty in it. Experimental claiming. Experimental. That was another polite word. It meant an alpha could take a null on trial, use her however he wanted, and return her within a month for a full refund. No questions asked. No consequences. The remaining alphas perked up. A few moved closer, intrigued. Varela felt their eyes on her like hands, assessing, calculating. She forced herself to breathe slowly, evenly. Panic wouldn't help. It never did. An alpha in a stained leather vest approached. He smelled like alcohol and sweat. He stopped in front of a young null with brown hair and freckles. "This one," he said, jerking his chin. The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she stepped forward. The matron made a note. Another alpha, this one broad and balding, pointed at a null with a crooked nose. "That one." 2 left. Varela and a thin, hollow-eyed woman named Maris. The minutes dragged. No one approached. Varela felt the familiar weight of invisibility settle over her like a cloak. This was normal. This was expected. She was nothing. She had always been nothing. "Remaining nulls are dismissed," Matron Superior said, her voice flat. "Report to the East Wing for reassignment." Reassignment. Another polite word. It meant the workhouse, scrubbing floors until her hands bled, hauling water until her back gave out, a slow death of exhaustion and neglect. Maris let out a choked sob and stumbled toward the side exit. Varela didn't move. She didn't know why. There was no point in staying. No alpha was coming for her. No miracle was waiting. But her feet wouldn't move. Her body refused to accept what her mind already knew. "Kane!" Matron Superior barked. "Move along! You're blocking—" The doors exploded. Not literally, but the sound was so violent, so sudden, that several women screamed. The heavy oak doors slammed open, crashing against the stone walls with a boom that shook the chandeliers. Candle wax dripped. Dust rained from the ceiling. And then he walked in. Varela had never seen him before, but she knew who he was. Everyone knew. Alpha King Riven Dragor. He was taller than any man she'd ever seen, easily 6.5 feet, his shoulders broad enough to block out the light from the doorway. He wore black boots, black trousers, a black coat that swept behind him like a shadow. His hair was dark, almost black, cut short and severe. His face was all sharp angles and brutal beauty, the kind of face that didn't smile, didn't soften, didn't forgive. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Silver. Not gray. Not pale blue. Silver. Like polished steel. Like moonlight on a blade. They swept across the hall with the precision of a predator scanning for prey. The room fell silent. Every woman froze. Every alpha dropped to one knee, heads bowed. Varela didn't kneel. She couldn't. Her knees had locked. Her lungs had forgotten how to pull air. The Alpha King walked forward, his boots echoing in the silence. He didn't look at the Matron Superior. Didn't acknowledge the alphas still kneeling. His gaze moved methodically across the hall, scanning faces, dismissing them one by one. And then his eyes locked on Varela. She felt the impact like a fist to the chest. He stopped walking. 30 feet away, dead center of the hall, he stopped. His head tilted slightly, his eyes narrowing. No, Varela whispered. It wasn't possible. This wasn't happening. He moved again, faster now, closing the distance in long, deliberate strides. Women scrambled out of his way. The matron started to speak. Your Majesty, I wasn't informed. But he ignored her completely. He stopped directly in front of Varela. Up close, he was overwhelming. The power radiating from him was suffocating, a physical force that pressed against her skin. She could smell him, cedar and smoke and something darker, something that made her hindbrain scream danger. Name, he said. His voice was deep, rough, like gravel dragged over stone. Varela's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Your name, he repeated, softer but no less commanding. Varela, she managed. Varela Kane. His eyes dropped to her wrist, to the brand. She saw his jaw tighten. Null, he said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, mute. No. He shook his head once, sharp. Not null. Varela blinked. What? He reached out and she flinched, but his hand didn't strike. It hovered over her wrist, not quite touching, and she felt something. A pull. A vibration in the air, in her bones, in the hollow space behind her ribs. I found you, he said quietly. 3 words, soft, almost reverent, and then louder, to the room. She's mine. The hall erupted. Matron Superior surged forward, sputtering. Your Majesty, there must be some mistake. She's null-marked. She has no bond, no lineage. I didn't ask for her paperwork, Riven said, his tone glacial. I'm claiming her, now. But the law requires, I am the law. Silence again. Heavier this time. Absolute. He turned back to Varela. Do you accept this claim? She stared at him. Her mind was a storm of confusion and disbelief. This was insane. He was the Alpha King. He could have anyone, any woman in the kingdom, any high-born lady with power and pedigree and beauty. Why her? Why now? Her voice cracked. I don't understand. You don't have to, he said. Do you accept? What choice did she have? The workhouse or the king, death by inches or whatever this was? Yes, she whispered. Something flickered in his eyes. Relief? Satisfaction? It was gone too fast to name. He turned to the matron. Record it. Your Majesty, I must protest. Record. It. The matron's face went white, then red, then white again. She bent over her ledger, her pen shaking. Riven looked back at Varela. Can you walk? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Then come. He didn't offer his hand, didn't wait for her to catch up. He simply turned and walked toward the doors, and Varela stumbled after him, her legs weak and her head spinning. Behind her, the hall erupted into chaos, whispers, shouts, the matron calling for order, but Varela didn't look back. She kept her eyes on the Alpha King's broad back, on the black coat that billowed behind him, on the impossible reality that she was walking out of the claiming hall, not as a discarded null, but as the chosen mate of the most powerful Alpha in the realm. Outside, the sun was too bright. Varela squinted, raising a hand to shield her eyes. A carriage waited in the courtyard, black lacquer and silver trim, pulled by 4 massive horses. A driver sat atop, his face carefully blank. 2 guards flanked the carriage door, both armed, both staring straight ahead. Riven stopped at the carriage steps. He turned to face her. Before we go, he said, you need to understand something. Varela's heart hammered. What? This isn't a love match. She almost laughed. Of course it wasn't. I need a queen, he continued, his voice flat, clinical. You need protection. This is a contract. You perform your duties, and I ensure your safety and status. That's all. What duties? She asked, because she needed to know, needed to understand what she was walking into. Public appearances, court functions, an heir, eventually. He paused. And you stay alive. Stay alive? She repeated slowly. That's a duty? His expression didn't change. In my court, it's the hardest one. A chill ran down her spine. Do you still accept? He asked. Varela looked back at the claiming hall, at the gray stone walls, the barred windows, the life of slow suffocation that waited for her inside. Then she looked at the Alpha King, at his cold silver eyes and the danger that clung to him like a second skin. It was a choice between one death and another. But at least this death came with a crown. "I accept," she said. He nodded once. Then he climbed into the carriage without another word. Varela followed. The interior was plush, velvet seats, silk curtains, the smell of leather and wood polish. Riven sat on one side, his long legs stretched out. Varela perched on the opposite seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The door closed, the carriage lurched forward. And Varela Kane, the girl no one wanted, the null, the nothing, began the journey to become a queen. Debumped. The ride was silent. Riven stared out the window, his face unreadable. Varela stared at her hands. The brand on her wrist seemed to throb, a constant reminder of what she was, what she wasn't. An hour passed. Maybe more. Varela had no sense of time, only the rocking of the carriage and the muffled sound of hoofbeats on stone. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Riven didn't look at her. "Does it matter?" "Yes." A pause. Then, "You're necessary." "Ah, that's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Varela bit her lip. She wanted to push, to demand a real explanation, but the set of his jaw told her it would be useless. He'd said what he was willing to say. Nothing more. The carriage slowed. Varela leaned toward the window, pulling back the curtain. Her breath caught. The palace. She'd seen drawings, heard descriptions, but nothing prepared her for the reality. It was a fortress and a cathedral combined. Massive stone walls, towers that pierced the sky, stained glass windows that glowed like jewels in the afternoon sun. The main gates were open, guarded by soldiers in silver armor. Beyond them, a courtyard stretched wide and immaculate, fountains spraying crystalline water, gardens blooming in impossible colors. The carriage rolled through the gates. People stopped to stare. Servants, guards, nobles in fine clothes. Their faces registered shock, confusion, curiosity. The Alpha King had returned, and he'd brought someone. The carriage stopped in front of a grand staircase. The door opened. Riven stepped out first, then turned and offered his hand. Varela took it. His grip was firm, warm. She felt that strange pull again, that vibration in her bones. But his expression remained neutral, detached. He released her hand the moment her feet touched the ground. A woman descended the stairs, middle-aged, elegant, her silver hair coiled in an elaborate bun. She wore a high-collared gown of deep blue, and her eyes were sharp as knives. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing. Then her gaze shifted to Varela, and her mouth tightened. "And guest?" "My queen," Riven corrected. "Varela Kane. She'll need quarters prepared, a wardrobe, tutors." The woman's shock was palpable. "Queen? But, Your Majesty, there was no announcement, no courtship." "There is now," Riven said. "Make the arrangements, Hestia." Hestia's eyes narrowed, but she bowed again. "As you command." Riven looked at Varela. "Hestia is the head of household. She'll see to your needs. Dinner's at 8. You're expected to attend." "Expected," Varela echoed. "Contract, remember?" He turned and walked away, his coat billowing behind him, leaving Varela alone with the woman whose expression said she'd rather be anywhere else. Hestia looked Varela up and down, taking in the threadbare dress, the scuffed shoes, the null brand on her wrist. "Well," she said coolly, "we certainly have our work cut out for us." Gets. The next hours were a blur. Hestia led Varela through a maze of corridors, marble floors, tapestried walls, ceilings painted with scenes of battles and coronations. Servants scurried past, their eyes sliding away when Varela looked at them. She heard whispers, felt the weight of judgment pressing in from all sides. Her quarters were absurdly large, a sitting room, a bedchamber, a bathing room with a tub big enough to swim in. The bed was draped in silk, the furniture polished to a gleam. Windows overlooked the gardens, the city, the mountains in the distance. It was beautiful. It was suffocating. "Measurements, Miss..." Hestia said briskly, gesturing to a trio of women who entered carrying fabric samples and measuring tapes. Varela stood still while they circled her, pulling and pinning and murmuring to each other in low voices. She felt like livestock being evaluated. Hair, Hestia continued, and another woman appeared, this one studying Varela's dark, tangled curls with open dismay. Bath first, the woman decided, and a deep conditioning treatment, possibly a trim. Varela let them lead her to the bathing room, let them fill the tub with steaming water and fragrant oils, let them scrub her skin until it was pink and raw. She sank into the water and closed her eyes. This morning, she'd been nothing. Tonight, she was supposed to be a queen. She didn't know which was more terrifying. At 8 o'clock, Hestia returned. Varela barely recognized herself in the mirror. The bath had transformed her skin, the oils leaving it soft and glowing. Her hair had been washed, trimmed, and styled into loose waves that cascaded over her shoulders. And the dress. God, the dress. It was deep green silk, fitted at the bodice and flowing at the skirt, with delicate gold embroidery at the cuffs and neckline. She looked not beautiful exactly, but not invisible either. Passable, Hestia said, which Varela suspected was high praise. They walked to the dining hall, another grand space with a table long enough to seat 50, but only 2 places were set, one at each end. Riven was already there, standing by the window. He'd changed into formal attire, a black jacket with silver buttons, a high-collared shirt. He looked even more imposing than before. He turned when they entered. His eyes swept over Varela, and she saw nothing. No reaction. No approval or disapproval. "Leave us," he told Hestia. Hestia bowed and withdrew. Silence. Riven gestured to the chair. "Sit." Varela sat. A servant appeared, pouring wine, setting down plates. The food was exquisite, roasted meat, fresh bread, vegetables and butter and herbs. Varela's stomach growled, but she hesitated, unsure of the protocol. "Eat," Raven said. "You look half-starved." She picked up her fork. They ate in silence for several minutes. Varela focused on her plate, trying not to think about the absurdity of this. Her, in a palace, dining with a king. "You'll meet the council tomorrow," Riven said abruptly. Varela looked up. "The council?" "My advisors. They'll have questions. About me. About everything." She set down her fork. "They won't accept me." "No," he agreed. "They won't." "Then why?" "Because I don't need their acceptance," he said. "I need their obedience." Varela felt a shiver of unease. "And if they don't obey?" His smile was cold. "They will." She believed him. "What do I say?" she asked. "When they question me?" "As little as possible," he said. "Let them think you're decorative, harmless. It's safer that way." "Safer for who?" He met her eyes. "For you." Varela's pulse quickened. "You keep saying that I need to stay alive. What aren't you telling me?" Riven leaned back in his chair. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "This court is dangerous. People have died for less than standing where you're standing. You're an outsider, a null, a girl from nowhere. You're a target." "Then why bring me here?" she demanded. "Because the alternative was worse." "For who?" "For both of us." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Finish your meal. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be difficult." He left without another word, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Varela sat alone in the too large dining hall, surrounded by half-eaten food and unanswered questions, and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. The council chamber was a cage dressed as grandeur. Varela stood at the threshold, her hand gripping the doorframe so hard her knuckles went white. Beyond the heavy doors she could hear voices, low, argumentative, male. They weren't expecting her yet. Hestia had positioned her here deliberately, forcing her to listen to what they really thought. "Absolute madness," someone was saying. "A null? He might as well have married a goat." Laughter, harsh and dismissive. "Perhaps the king has finally lost his mind," another voice chimed in. "The strain of the throne, or perhaps he's testing us," a third voice cut through, older, measured. "To see how far we'll bend before we break." "Well, I won't bend for this," the first voice snapped. A queen should have lineage, power, something to offer the realm. What does this girl bring? Shame, weakness. Virella's stomach twisted. She'd expected this. Riven had warned her. But hearing it spoken aloud, hearing the contempt dripping from every word, was different than imagining it. The door opened. Hestia stood there, her expression carefully neutral. They're ready for you now. No, they weren't, and neither was she. But Virella stepped through anyway. The council chamber was circular, with high windows that let in cold morning light. A massive oak table dominated the center, surrounded by 12 men in fine robes and heavy chains of office. They turned as one when she entered, their faces ranging from curiosity to open disgust. Riven sat at the head of the table, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't smile, didn't acknowledge her at all. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "My queen, Virella Kane." One of the men, elderly, with a silver beard that reached his chest, leaned back in his chair. "So it's true. You actually went through with it." "I did," Riven said. "And you expect us to accept this arrangement?" "I don't expect anything, Lord Castor. I'm informing you of a fact." Castor's eyes narrowed. "A fact that affects the entire realm. The queen is not merely your wife, your majesty. She represents the crown, the bloodline, the future. And you've chosen—" He gestured at Virella with barely concealed disdain. "This." Virella felt heat crawl up her neck. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but Riven's earlier words echoed in her mind. "Let them think you're decorative, harmless. It's safer that way." Another counselor spoke up, younger than Castor but no less hostile. "She's null-marked. That means no bond, no power. How do we know she can even produce an heir?" "You don't," Riven said flatly, "but that's not your concern." "It's every counselor's concern," a third man interjected. "The stability of the realm depends on succession. If this girl can't—" "Enough." Riven's voice dropped to a register that made the air feel thinner. "My marriage is not up for debate. You're here to be informed, not consulted." Silence, heavy and resentful. Lord Castor stood slowly, his chair scraping against the stone floor. "With all due respect, your majesty, the council has a right to voice concerns about decisions that impact the kingdom." "Voice them," Riven said. "I'll ignore them." Castor's face flushed red. "You overstep, your majesty. Even a king must answer to—" "To who?" Riven leaned forward, his silver eyes glinting. "To you? To a council I could disband with a single decree? Don't mistake ceremony for power, Castor. I allow this council to exist because it's convenient, not because it's necessary." The room went deathly quiet. Virella stood frozen, watching the battle of wills play out. She'd never seen power wielded like this, not with fists or blades, but with words and presence. Riven didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten. He simply was, and that was enough to make grown men flinch. Castor sat down, but the anger radiating from him was palpable. "The queen will accompany me to all formal functions," Riven continued, as if nothing had happened. "She will be addressed with the appropriate titles and given the respect her position demands. Is that understood?" Murmurs of reluctant agreement. "Good," Riven stood. "We're done here." He walked out without waiting for dismissal, without looking at Virella. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then followed, acutely aware of the eyes burning into her back. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud. Riven didn't slow down. Virella hurried to keep pace, her borrowed shoes clicking on the marble floor. "That went well," she said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "It went exactly as expected." "They hate me." "Yes." "And that doesn't bother you?" He stopped walking, turned to face her. "Why would it?" Virella stared at him. "Because I'm supposed to be your queen, and they just spent the last 10 minutes explaining why I'm not fit to scrub their floors, let alone wear a crown. They're entitled to their opinions." "That's it?" She felt anger spark in her chest. "That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say?" Riven asked, his tone maddeningly calm. "That they're wrong? That you're worthy? Neither of those things matter." "They matter to me." "Then you're wasting energy." He started walking again. "Their approval won't keep you alive. Their respect won't protect you. Learn that now and you might survive this. Varela wanted to scream, or cry, or both. Instead, she clenched her fists and followed him down the corridor, swallowing the words that would only make things worse. They reached a set of double doors. Riven pushed them open, revealing a training yard. Varela blinked. Why are we? You need to learn how to defend yourself. I thought you said I'd be protected. Protected, yes. Safe, no. He gestured to a woman standing in the center of the yard, tall, muscular, with short cropped hair and scars crisscrossing her arms. This is Commander Senna. She'll teach you what you need to know. Senna looked Varela up and down, her expression unreadable. This is the Queen? Yes. She's scrawny. Fix that, Riven said, and left. Varela stood there, feeling like she'd been dropped into ice water. Senna circled her slowly. You ever hold a weapon before? No. Ever been in a fight? Not one I won. Ever killed anyone? Varela's eyes widened. What? No, Senna grunted. Well, we'll start with the basics then. She tossed Varela a wooden practice sword. It hit Varela's chest and clattered to the ground. Pick it up, Senna said. Varela bent and retrieved the sword. It was heavier than she expected, awkward in her hands. Hold it like you mean it, Senna instructed. Not like you're afraid it'll bite you. Varela adjusted her grip. Better? Now stance. Feet apart. Knees bent. You want to be balanced, ready to move. For the next 2 hours, Senna drilled her relentlessly. Footwork. Grip. Basic strikes. Varela's arms burned, her legs shook, sweat soaked through her dress. Again, Senna barked. Varela swung the practice sword. It wobbled, the arc clumsy. Again. Swing, miss, stumble. Again. By the time Senna finally called a halt, Varela could barely stand. Her hands were blistered, her muscles screaming. You're weak, Senna said bluntly. But you didn't quit. That's something. Varela wanted to collapse. Instead, she nodded. Tomorrow, same time, Senna said. And eat more. You're too thin to fight anything bigger than a rat. Varela limped back to her quarters, every step agony. Hestia was waiting, her face pinched with disapproval. You're filthy, Hestia said. Training, Varela managed. Queens don't train. Queens sit prettily and smile. Well, I guess I'm not that kind of queen. Hestia's mouth thinned. You're not any kind of queen, not yet. She gestured to a pile of books on the table. Court etiquette, history, protocol. You have a week to memorize them. A week? The spring gala is in 7 days. Every noble house will be there. You will be presented formally as queen, and you will not embarrass his majesty. Varela looked at the mountain of books, then at her blistered hands, then at Hestia's unyielding expression. 7 days, she repeated. 7 days, Hestia confirmed. I suggest you start reading. She left. Varela sank into a chair, picked up the first book, The History and Lineage of the 7 Houses, and opened it. The words swam before her eyes. The days blurred together. Mornings with Senna, her body learning to move in ways it never had. Strike, block, dodge, fall, get up, do it again. Afternoons with tutors who looked at her like she was a particularly disappointing puzzle. Evenings alone in her quarters, reading until her eyes burned and her head pounded. Riven was absent. She saw him at dinners, silent, formal affairs where they sat at opposite ends of the table and exchanged maybe 10 words total. He never asked how her training was going, never commented on the bruises blooming on her arms or the exhaustion carved into her face. He was a stranger who happened to be her husband. On the 5th day, Hestia brought the dress. It was stunning. Midnight blue silk with silver embroidery that caught the light like stars. The bodice was fitted, the skirt flowing, the neckline just low enough to be elegant without being scandalous. For the gala, Hestia said, laying it across the bed. Varela touched the fabric. It was softer than anything she'd ever worn. It's beautiful. It should be. It costs more than most people make in a year. Hestia's tone was dry. Try it on. Varela stripped off her training clothes and stepped into the dress. Hestia laced it up, tugging the stays tight until Varela could barely breathe. Too tight, Varela gasped. That's how it's supposed to feel, Hestia said. Beauty is discomfort. Varela looked at herself in the mirror. The dress transformed her, made her look regal, elegant, like someone who belonged in a palace. But underneath, she was still the same girl. Still null. Still nothing. You'll do, Hestia said, which was probably the closest thing to a compliment Varela would ever get from her. The night of the gala arrived too quickly. Varela stood in her quarters, dressed and primped and terrified. Her hair was swept up in an elaborate style, her face painted with subtle cosmetics, her neck and ears adorned with jewels that probably cost more than the claiming hall itself. She looked like a queen. She felt like a fraud. A knock at the door. Riven entered and Varela's breath caught. He wore formal blacks, a tailored jacket with silver trim, high boots polished to a shine, a cloak that draped over one shoulder. He looked like a king carved from shadow and steel. His eyes swept over her, quick and assessing. You look acceptable. Acceptable, Varela repeated. High praise. His mouth might have twitched, or maybe she imagined it. The gala will be difficult, he said. The nobles will test you, push you, try to embarrass you. I know. Don't let them. And if I do, then you prove them right. He offered his arm. Varela took it, and they walked together through the palace corridors. The ballroom was enormous, glittering with chandeliers and filled with hundreds of people in their finest. Music played, strings and flutes, light and airy. Servants circulated with trays of wine and delicacies, and everywhere Varela looked, she saw wealth, power, and eyes that judged her and found her lacking. The announcer's voice boomed, His Majesty, King Riven Dragor, and Her Majesty, Queen Varela Kane. The room fell silent. Riven descended the stairs, Varela at his side. Every step felt like walking a tightrope. She kept her chin up, her expression neutral, her hand steady on his arm. They reached the bottom, the crowd parted, and then the whispers started. That's her? The null? What was he thinking? Varela's face burned, but she kept walking. Riven led her to the center of the room, where a space had been cleared for the first dance. He turned to face her. Remember what Hestia taught you. Don't step on your feet, don't fall, don't embarrass you. Close enough. The music shifted, a waltz, slow and elegant. Riven placed one hand at her waist, took her hand in his, and they began to move. Varela had practiced this, hours and hours with a dance tutor who corrected her every misstep with a sharp rap of a cane. But practicing alone was different than dancing in front of hundreds of hostile eyes. She stumbled. Riven's grip tightened, steadying her. Focus, he murmured. She did, forced herself to block out the crowd, the whispers, the weight of judgment. There was only the music, his hand at her waist, the rhythm of their steps. They moved together, and for a moment, Varela forgot to be afraid. The dance ended. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Riven released her. Passable. Then he walked away, leaving her standing alone in the center of the ballroom. The vultures descended. Your Majesty, a woman in crimson silk purred, her smile sharp. How quaint that you've joined us. Tell me, did you have to study etiquette, or did it come naturally? I studied, Varela said evenly. How industrious. The woman's eyes glittered. And your family? Are they here tonight? I'd so love to meet them. I have no family. Oh. False sympathy. How tragic. But I suppose that makes things simpler. No embarrassing relatives to explain away. Another woman joined them, this one older, dripping in jewels. I must say, Your Majesty, your dress is lovely, though I do wonder, did you choose it yourself, or did someone with taste select it for you? Varela's hands clenched at her sides. It was selected for me. I thought so. The woman smiled. It's always so obvious when someone is playing dress-up. Laughter, cruel and tinkling. Varela felt her temper flare. She wanted to lash out, to say something cutting and vicious. But that would only prove them right. So she smiled instead, calm, serene, as empty as they believed her to be. If you'll excuse me, she said, and walked away. She found refuge near a column, partially hidden from view. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them against the cool stone, willing herself to calm down. They're relentless, aren't they? Varela turned. A man stood nearby, young, maybe 30, with dark hair and kind eyes. He wore the colors of House Montrath, a minor noble family. I'm sorry, Varela said. The vultures, he clarified, gesturing subtly to the crowd. They smell weakness and circle. It's what they do. And you're different? He smiled. I like to think so. I'm Kieran Montrath, and before you ask, no, I don't think you're a mistake. Varela blinked. You don't? I think the king knows what he's doing, even if the rest of us don't. That's a generous interpretation. Maybe, Kieran shrugged, or maybe I just don't like bullies. Despite everything, Varela felt a small smile tug at her lips. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The night's not over. He was right. An hour later, Lord Castor cornered her near the refreshment table. His eyes were cold, his smile colder. Enjoying yourself, Your Majesty? He asked. It's an interesting evening, Varela said carefully. Interesting, yes. He sipped his wine. Tell me, do you understand the responsibility you've taken on? The weight of the crown? I'm learning. Learning, he chuckled. How quaint. But learning isn't enough, is it? A queen must be born to this, bred for it. You can put a crown on a knoll, but that doesn't make her royalty. Varela's jaw tightened. Is there a question in there, Lord Castor, or are you just enjoying the sound of your own voice? His expression darkened. Careful, girl. You may wear a crown, but you have no power here. Neither do you, Varela shot back, or you wouldn't be wasting your time threatening me. For a moment, she thought he might strike her. His hand twitched, his face going red. But then he smiled, slow and venomous. Enjoy your brief reign, he said softly. It won't last. He walked away. Varela stood there, her heart pounding, her hands trembling. She'd just made an enemy, a powerful one, but she refused to regret it. The rest of the gala passed in a haze. More dances, more cutting remarks disguised as pleasantries, more smiles that didn't reach eyes. By the time Riven finally signaled that they could leave, Varela was exhausted. They walked back to her quarters in silence. At her door, Riven paused. You survived, he said. Barely. That's all that matters? Castor threatened me. Riven's expression didn't change. What did he say? That my reign won't last. He's not wrong. Varela stared at him. What? Nothing lasts forever, Riven said. Not even queens. And before she could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the echo of his words and the creeping certainty that she'd stepped into something far more dangerous than a loveless marriage. She pushed open the door to her quarters and froze. Someone had been inside. The room was trashed, books scattered, furniture overturned, and on the mirror, written in red paint that looked disturbingly like blood, were 3 words, not your place. Varela's breath came short and fast. She backed toward the door, her mind racing. Who did this? When? How did they get past the guards? She turned to run, to find help, to scream, and came face to face with a guard. Not one she recognized. He smiled. It wasn't friendly. Going somewhere, Your Majesty? Varela's instinct screamed at her to run, but her feet stayed rooted to the floor. The guard blocking her path wasn't one of Riven's regular men. She'd memorized their faces over the past week, a survival habit she'd picked up fast. This one was broader, older, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw and eyes that held nothing but cold intent. I said, going somewhere? He repeated, stepping closer. Varela's hand went to her side, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Senna's training kicked in. Assess, adapt, act. She was unarmed, exhausted, and trapped between a hostile guard and a vandalized room. Not good odds. I'm looking for Commander Senna, she said, forcing her voice steady. There's been a breach. Has there? The guard's smile widened. Funny. I didn't see anything. Behind him, 2 more guards appeared in the corridor, also unfamiliar, also blocking her escape. Varela's pulse hammered. Who sent you? Does it matter? Yes. He laughed. Brave. Stupid, but brave. He reached for her arm. Varela moved without thinking, grabbed his wrist, twisted like Senna had taught her, used his momentum against him. He stumbled, surprised, and she ran. She didn't get far. The second guard caught her by the waist, hauling her backward. She kicked, hard, connected with something soft. He grunted, but didn't let go. "Feisty little null," he growled in her ear. "They said you'd be easy." Varela drove her elbow back into his ribs. His grip loosened just enough for her to wrench free. She bolted down the corridor, her borrowed shoes slipping on the marble, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, footsteps thundered. She rounded a corner and slammed directly into someone. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her, writhing. Relief and terror flooded through her in equal measure. "They're after me," she gasped. "Guards. Not yours." "They—" Riven's eyes went to something behind her. His expression turned glacial. The three guards skidded to a halt, their faces going pale when they saw the king. "Your Majesty," the scarred one stammered. There was a disturbance. We were investigating by chasing my wife through the palace." Riven's voice was deadly quiet. "She was running, we thought." "You thought?" Riven released Varela and walked toward them, slow and deliberate. "You thought it was appropriate to lay hands on the queen?" The guard's mouth opened, closed. No words came out. "Who hired you?" Riven asked. Silence. "I asked a question." We weren't hired, Your Majesty. We were simply—" Riven moved faster than Varela's eyes could track. One moment he was standing 3 feet away. The next, his hand was wrapped around the guard's throat, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. "Lie to me again," Riven said softly. "See what happens." The guard choked, his face turning purple. The other two started forward, then froze when Riven's gaze cut to them. "Try it," he invited. They didn't. Riven's attention returned to the guard in his grip. "Last chance. Who hired you?" The guard's lips moved, forming a word Varela barely caught. "Castor." Riven dropped him. The guard collapsed, gasping. "Get out," Riven said. "All 3 of you. You have until dawn to leave the city. If I see you again, you won't leave at all." They scrambled away, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. Riven turned to Varela. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Your room?" "Destroyed. Someone got in while we were at the gala, left a message." His jaw tightened. "Show me." They walked back to her quarters. Riven took in the damage with cold, methodical precision. The overturned furniture, the scattered books, the message on the mirror. "Pack what you need," he said. "You're moving." "Where?" "My chambers." Varela's eyes widened. "You're what?" "It's the most secure location in the palace, and if someone wants to get to you, they'll have to go through me first." "I thought this was a contract marriage." "No, it is," he cut her off. "This is about security, not sentiment. Don't read into it." Varela wanted to argue, but looking at the red paint dripping down her mirror, at the malice behind those 3 words, she realized she didn't have the luxury of pride. "Fine," she said. She grabbed a few belongings, clothes, the books she'd been studying, a small carved bird that had been her only possession before the claiming hall. Riven watched in silence, then gestured for her to follow. His chambers were in the western tower, accessible only by a guarded staircase. The guards here Varela recognized, Riven's personal detail, men who'd been with him for years. They didn't question her presence, simply opened the doors and stepped aside. The space was austere. A large bed with dark linens, a desk covered in maps and correspondence, weapons mounted on the walls, swords, daggers, a wicked-looking axe. No decoration, no warmth. It looked like a place someone slept in, not lived in. "There's a bathing room through there," Riven said, pointing to a door. "Use whatever you need. I'll have Hestia bring more of your things in the morning." Varela set her belongings down. "What about Castor?" "What about him?" "He tried to have me killed." "Probably. And you're just—" "What? Going to let that go?" Riven's smile was sharp and humorless. "Who said I was letting it go?" Before she could ask what that meant, he turned and left, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Varela stood alone in the king's chambers, surrounded by weapons and shadows, and wondered how her life had become this. She didn't sleep that night. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. She lay in an armchair by the window, watching the moon track across the sky, her mind racing. Riven didn't return. Dawn came gray and cold. A knock at the door made Varela jolt upright. Hestia entered, carrying an armful of dresses and a tray of food.
"You look terrible," Hestia said bluntly. "I didn't sleep." "Obviously." Hestia set down the tray. "Eat. His Majesty wants you in the throne room in an hour." "Why?" "He didn't say, but I'd suggest you look presentable." An hour later, Varela stood in the throne room wearing a deep burgundy dress and trying not to show her nerves. The room was filled with courtiers, nobles, and guards. At the far end, Riven sat on the throne, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard.
Lord Castor stood before him, flanked by 2 guards. The old man's face was pale but defiant. "Your Majesty, I demand to know why I've been summoned like a common criminal." "You were summoned like a traitor," Riven said, "which is what you are." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Castor's eyes narrowed. "That is a serious accusation." "It's a fact," Riven gestured to the guards. "Bring them in." The 3 guards from last night were dragged into the room, their hands bound. They looked worse than Varela remembered. Bruised, bloodied, broken. "These men," Riven said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "attempted to assault the Queen last night. When questioned, they confessed to being hired by Lord Castor." The room erupted in whispers. Castor's face went from pale to red. "They're lying. They'll say anything under torture." "I didn't torture them," Riven said mildly. "I simply asked, repeatedly." "This is absurd. I would never..." "Guts, you would." Riven stood, descending from the throne. "You've made your contempt for my choice of queen very clear. You've undermined her at every turn. And when words weren't enough, you escalated. You have no proof." Riven stopped in front of him. "I have their confession. I have witnesses who saw them enter and leave your estate. And I have this." He pulled a piece of parchment from his coat. "A ledger entry from your accounts. Payment made to 3 guards for special services." "Care to explain?" Castor's mouth opened, closed. His eyes darted around the room, looking for allies, for escape. He found neither. "I demand a trial," he said finally. "By law, I am entitled..." "You're entitled to nothing." Riven's voice dropped to that dangerous quiet. "You conspired to harm the Queen. That's treason. The penalty is death." The word hung in the air like a blade. "You wouldn't dare," Castor whispered. "I have allies, influence." "Had," Riven corrected. "Past tense." He looked at the guards. "Take him to the cells. Execution at dawn." Castor screamed as they dragged him away, his composure finally shattering. "You'll regret this. The council won't stand for it. She's not worth this. She's nothing. Nothing." His voice echoed down the corridors until a door slammed and cut it off. Silence filled the throne room. Riven turned to address the crowd. "Let this serve as a lesson. The Queen is under my protection. Anyone who threatens her threatens me, and I don't forgive threats." He looked directly at Varela then, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, something she couldn't name. "Dismissed," he said. The crowd dispersed quickly, whispers and sideways glances following them out. Varela approached the throne. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He was right about one thing. The council will push back. You just executed one of their senior members. Let them push. Riven's expression was unreadable. They'll learn the same lesson Castor did. Varela studied him. "Why are you doing this? Really? I told you, you're necessary." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." She wanted to scream, to demand the truth. But she was learning that Riven gave away nothing he didn't want to give. Pushing only made him shut down harder. "Fine," she said. "Keep your secrets, but don't expect me to trust you." "I don't." That hurt more than it should have. Varela turned to leave, but Riven's voice stopped her. "Training with Senna continues, but you'll also start learning palace security, escape routes, how to identify threats. Hestia will arrange it." "Why?" "Because I won't always be there to protect you." The words felt like a warning or a prophecy. The following weeks blurred into a brutal routine. Mornings with Senna,
Her body pushed past every limit. Afternoons with tutors on politics, history, strategy.
Evenings studying maps of the palace, memorizing guard rotations, learning which servants could be trusted and which reported to hostile houses. Varela saw Riven rarely. He was always in meetings, dealing with council backlash, managing threats both internal and external. When they did cross paths, their conversations were brief, transactional. But she noticed things. The way he always positioned himself between her and potential threats. The way his eyes tracked her across rooms, subtle but constant. The way he'd quietly replaced every guard on her detail with men he trusted absolutely. He was protecting her. Obsessively. Desperately, even. She didn't understand why. 6 weeks after the gala, Varela woke in the middle of the night to find Riven sitting in the chair by the window, his head in his hands.
"Riven?"
she said quietly. He didn't move. She got out of bed, wrapping a robe around herself. As she got closer, she saw he was shaking. Not from cold, from something else. "What's wrong?"
"Nothing." His voice was rough, strained. "Go back to sleep."
"You're a terrible liar." He laughed, but it sounded broken. "Varela, please, just go." She should have listened, should have left him alone, but something in his voice, in the way he held himself like he was barely keeping himself together, made her stay. She knelt in front of him, forcing him to look at her. His eyes were wrong. The silver had darkened, swirling with something that looked like smoke. And when he looked at her, she saw pain so deep it made her chest ache. "What's happening to you?" she whispered. "Something I can't stop. Tell me." "If I tell you, you'll run, and you should. You should run as far from me as possible." "I'm not running." "You will. Try me." Riven stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he spoke. "There's something inside me. A shadow. An entity. It's been there since I was a child, bound by magic, contained. But the bindings are breaking, and when they fully collapse, it will take over, consume me, destroy everything." Varela's blood ran cold. "How do you stop it?" "I don't. The binding was designed to last a lifetime, but it's failing. Too much stress, too much power. Every time I use my authority, every time I fight, it weakens the seal." "Then stop fighting. Stop using your power." "I can't. I'm the king, and there are threats you don't even know about. Enemies at the borders, rebellions brewing, houses vying for the throne. If I show weakness, they'll strike, and everyone will die." "So you're just waiting to lose control?" "I was." He met her eyes. "Until I found you." Varela's breath caught. "What does that mean?" "The entity feeds on emotion. Anger, fear, hate. It grows stronger with every negative feeling. But there's one thing that can strengthen the seal instead of weakening it."
"What?" "Love." The word hit her like a physical blow. "That's why I needed you," Riven continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not for politics, not for heirs, for survival. If I could form a bond, a real bond, not the artificial ones alphas usually have, it would reinforce the binding, give me more time." "You thought I could love you," Varela said slowly. "I thought you might be capable of it. Most aren't, not really. But you, there's something in you. Something I recognized the moment I saw you. And if I can't? If I don't? Then I lose control. The shadow takes over. And it will kill everyone, starting with the people closest to me." Varela sat back on her heels, her mind reeling. This was insane. He'd married her to save himself from a monster inside him. He'd brought her here, put her in danger, all for a desperate gamble that she might develop feelings for a man who barely spoke to her. "You used me," she said. "Yes." "You're still using me." "Yes." At least he wasn't lying anymore. "Why tell me now?" she asked. "Because the seal is breaking faster than I anticipated, and you deserve to know what's coming." "How long do we have?" "Weeks, maybe less." Varela stood, pacing to the window. Outside, the city slept, unaware that their king was a ticking bomb. "There has to be another way," she said. "Another solution." "There isn't. I've searched for years. This was the only option." Then we find a new option." "Varela." "I'm not giving up," she said fiercely. You pulled me out of that claiming hall, dragged me into this mess, made me a queen. You don't get to quit now. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe. Or desperation. What are you suggesting? I don't know yet, but we figure it out, together. He stood, crossing to her. For the first time since she'd met him, he reached out and touched her face, his hand gentle against her cheek. You're stronger than I thought, he said softly. I'm not strong. I'm stubborn. There's a difference. His lips twitched, almost a smile, and then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was raw and desperate and tasted like fear and need and something else she couldn't name. Varela froze for a heartbeat, then kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. That was, she started. A mistake, he finished. It can't happen again. Why not? Because the more I feel for you, the more dangerous this becomes. Love strengthens the seal, yes. But if I lose control while loving you, the entity will go straight for you. You'll be the first to die. That's a risk I'm willing to take. Well, I'm not. He stepped back, putting distance between them. This conversation is over. Get some sleep. Raven, sleep, Varela. He left the room. Varela stood there, her lips still tingling, her heart still racing, and realized she was in far deeper trouble than she'd thought. Because somewhere between the claiming hall and this moment, between the threats and the training and the quiet moments when he thought she wasn't looking, she'd started to care about him. And if what he said was true, that might be the thing that killed them both. The next morning, everything went to hell. Varela woke to shouting. She scrambled out of bed, throwing on a robe, and ran to the door. The corridor was chaos, guards running, servants screaming, and smoke, thick and black, pouring from somewhere below. Senna appeared, her face grim. We need to move, now. What's happening? Attack. Multiple entry points. Professional. We need to get you to the safe room. Where's Riven? Fighting. Your Majesty, we don't have time. An explosion rocked the palace. Varela stumbled, catching herself against the wall. Move! Senna grabbed her arm, dragging her down the corridor. They ran through smoke and chaos, past bodies, guards, attackers. Varela couldn't tell which. The sound of clashing steel echoed from every direction. They reached a concealed door. Senna yanked it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Down! Go! Varela descended, her bare feet slipping on the stone steps. Behind her, Senna followed, slamming the door shut. They emerged in a small chamber. Stone walls, no windows, a single torch providing light. A safe room, designed to withstand siege. Stay here, Senna ordered. Don't open the door for anyone but me or the king, understand? Senna, understand? Yes. Senna nodded and left, the door locking behind her. Varela was alone. She sank to the floor, her mind racing. Who was attacking? Why now? And where was Riven? Minutes passed, or hours, she couldn't tell. Then she heard it, a sound from above. Scraping. Scratching. Something was trying to get in. The torch flickered, then went out completely. Darkness. Absolute and suffocating. Varela's breath came faster. She pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear. The scraping stopped. Silence. Then a voice, soft and wrong, speaking from everywhere and nowhere at once. Found you. Not Riven's voice, but not entirely unfamiliar either. I've been waiting, the voice continued, waiting for him to care. And now he does. I can feel it. The bond forming, the seal strengthening. Varela's blood turned to ice. But it won't be enough, the voice whispered. It's never enough. And when the seal breaks, I'll wear his skin and burn this world to ash, starting with you. Light blazed, but it wasn't the torch. It was Varela's wrist, the null brand, the one that had marked her as empty, powerless. Nothing was glowing, burning with light so bright it hurt to look at. Pain lanced through her arm. She screamed, clutching her wrist, and the light exploded outward. The safe room shattered, stone walls cracked. The door blew off its hinges, and from somewhere deep inside her, something that had been sleeping, sealed, hidden, woke up. Fire. Living fire coursing through her veins, demanding release.
Varela looked at her hands and saw flames dancing across her skin. The voice in the darkness laughed. There you are. And Varela realized with absolute certainty that she wasn't null. She'd never been null. She'd been sealed, locked away, hidden. And now, whatever she really was, it was breaking free. The fire didn't burn her. That was the first impossible thing Varela noticed as flames crawled up her arms, bright and alive and utterly wrong. They should have charred her flesh, reduced her to ash. Instead, they felt like an extension of herself, warm, demanding, hungry for release. The second impossible thing was the voice in the darkness, still laughing. Finally, it purred. I was beginning to think you'd never wake up. Varela staggered back, her hands blazing, her mind screaming that this couldn't be real. The null brand on her wrist was gone, not faded, not hidden, but burned away entirely, leaving smooth, unblemished skin that glowed faintly in the firelight. What did you do to me? She demanded, her voice shaking. I didn't do anything, the voice said. This was always you, hidden, sealed, locked away by people who were terrified of what you'd become. That's not... I'm null, I have no power. You believe that lie because they made you believe it. The darkness shifted, coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape made of smoke and shadow. But you were never empty, little queen. You were a weapon they didn't know how to use. The flames surged higher, reacting to her fear. The broken walls of the safe room began to blacken, stone cracking under the heat. Stop, Varela gasped, trying to pull the fire back. It didn't obey. If anything, it grew stronger. I don't know how... Then learn, fast, because I'm coming for him. The shadow lunged. Varela threw her hands up instinctively. Fire exploded outward in a wave of heat and light. The shadow recoiled, hissing, but didn't dissipate. Good, it said, but not good enough. It came at her again, faster this time. Varela scrambled backward, her fire flickering and wild, completely beyond her control. The shadow's hands, if they could be called hands, reached for her throat. A blade sliced through it. Riven materialized between Varela and the shadow, a sword in his hand that gleamed with an unnatural silver light. The shadow shrieked and pulled back, smoke boiling off where the blade had cut through. Get behind me, Riven ordered, not looking at her. Varela didn't move. Couldn't. Her eyes were locked on him. On the way his movements were just slightly off, jerky and wrong. On the veins of black crawling up his neck, visible above his collar. On the way his left hand shook, even as his right held the sword steady. You're losing control, she whispered. I know. The shadow laughed. Look at you, fighting me, fighting yourself. How long do you think you can keep this up? Long enough, Riven said. For what? She can't save you. Even with her little fire trick, she's untrained, wild. She'll burn herself out before she burns me. Riven's jaw tightened. The black veins spread further. Varela made a decision. She stepped forward, placing herself beside Riven instead of behind him. Her hands were still burning, the fire unstable and dangerous. Varela, get back. No, she said. You told me the entity feeds on your emotions, right? Anger, fear, hate. Yes, but then stop fighting it alone. She grabbed his free hand. The effect was instantaneous. The fire in her veins surged toward him, not burning, but connecting. She felt it. The bond he'd talked about, the one he'd been trying to build between them. It snapped into place like a lock turning, and suddenly she could feel everything he felt. The pain, the exhaustion, the desperate clawing terror that he was going to lose himself and take everyone with him. And underneath all that, buried deep, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. The relief he felt every time she walked into a room unharmed. The careful, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be the anchor that kept him human. Oh, Varela breathed. The shadow screamed. The bond between them blazed, and Varela felt the seal around the entity strengthen. Not much, but enough. Enough to push it back. Enough to give Riven room to breathe. What did you just do? Riven asked, his voice rough. Gave you what you needed, Varela said. A connection. Real, not forced. The shadow writhed, rage radiating from it in waves. You think that will save him?
You think a little bonding magic will be enough? I've been with him since he was 7 years old. I know every part of him. I am him. No, Varela said, her voice stronger now. You're a parasite, and parasites can be removed.
The shadow lunged again, but this time Riven was ready. His sword moved in an arc of silver light, cutting through the smoke. The shadow shrieked and scattered, reforming several feet away. You can't kill me, it snarled. I'm bound to his soul. If I die, he dies. Then we don't kill you, Varela said. We cage you. She didn't know where the words came from. Some instinct, some deep knowledge that came with the fire now burning through her veins. She could feel it, the shape of the original binding, the way it had been constructed. Layers of magic, ancient and complex, designed to contain without destroying, and she could see where it had broken. The seal wasn't designed to last forever, she said, more to herself than anyone else. It needed to be reinforced, renewed, but whoever bound you didn't teach him how. They're all dead, the shadow said, almost conversational now. Everyone who knew the original binding, dead for decades. Then we improvise. Varela closed her eyes, focusing on the fire. It wasn't just destructive, she could feel that now. It was alive, responsive, capable of more than just burning. It could create, build, seal. She reached for Riven's hand again, gripping tighter. I need you to trust me. That's a lot to ask. I know. His fingers tightened around hers. Do it. Varela pulled the fire inward, shaping it, directing it. Through the bond she could feel Riven's soul, bright and fierce and so tired, and wrapped around it like chains, the shadow entity, feeding off his strength. She couldn't kill it, but she could contain it. The fire flowed from her into him, not burning but building. She traced the broken parts of the seal, filling cracks, reinforcing weak points. It was like sewing with flame, delicate and agonizing and absolutely necessary. The shadow fought back. It lashed out through their connection, trying to break her concentration, flooding her mind with images. Riven as a child, screaming as the entity was first bound. The pain of the process. The people who'd done it, their faces cold and clinical. The years of isolation, of being told he was dangerous. That the thing inside him made him a monster. Varela gritted her teeth and kept working. You can't hold me, the shadow hissed. I've had years to grow strong. Your little fire is nothing. Maybe, Varela said through clenched teeth. But it's mine, and I'm not letting go. The seal began to close. The shadow screamed, thrashing, pouring all its fury into breaking free. Varela felt it like a physical assault, claws raking across her mind, trying to tear the bond apart. She held on. Riven's grip on her hand tightened until bones ground together. She could feel him fighting too, using every ounce of will to help her contain the entity. Almost there, she gasped. Just a little more. The shadow made one final, desperate lunge. It poured everything into a single attack, trying to overwhelm them both. Varela met it head on. The fire exploded. For a moment, everything was white-hot brightness and searing pain. Varela heard herself screaming, heard Riven shouting her name, heard the shadow shriek of rage and denial. Then silence. Varela opened her eyes. They were on their knees in the ruined safe room, still holding hands. The fire had gone out, leaving only faint wisps of smoke. The shadow was gone. Not destroyed, but contained. Locked deep inside Riven behind a seal that blazed with new strength. It wouldn't last forever. Varela could feel that. The binding would need to be reinforced regularly, maintained, but it would hold for now. Riven was staring at her, his eyes wide. The black veins had receded, leaving only faint traces. How did you— I don't know, Varela said honestly. I just did. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She felt him shaking. I thought I was going to lose you, he said against her hair. When the fire exploded, I thought— I'm fine, she lied. Her entire body felt like it had been wrung out and left to dry. We're both fine. You're not null. Apparently not. He pulled back, looking at her face. Who did this to you? Who sealed your power? I don't know. I don't remember anything before the claiming hall, but someone wanted to make sure I never knew what I was. Why? That's the question, isn't it? Footsteps thundered above them, voices shouting. The attack was still ongoing. Riven stood, pulling Varela to her feet. Can you walk? I think so. Good, because we need to end this. They climbed out of the ruined safe room into chaos. The palace was a war zone. Bodies littered the corridors, some in guard uniforms, others in the black leather of professional assassins. Fires burned in multiple locations, smoke thick in the air. Senna appeared around a corner, bloodied but alive. Her eyes widened when she saw them. Your Majesty, we thought the explosion— We're fine, Riven said curtly. Status? Under control, barely. Whoever organized this knew our defenses. They hit us in 6 places simultaneously. Survivors? We've captured 3. The rest are dead or fled. Take me to the survivors. Senna led them through the palace to a courtyard where 3 men knelt, bound and bloodied. Guards surrounded them, weapons drawn. Riven approached the nearest captive. Who sent you? The man spat blood. Go to hell. Riven's hand shot out, grabbing the man by the throat. Wrong answer. Wait, Varela said. Riven paused, looking at her. Varela stepped forward, studying the captive. Something about him was familiar. Not his face, but the way he held himself. The tattoo on his neck, a circle with a slash through it. The null mark. You're from the claiming hall? She said slowly. The man's eyes flickered, just for a second, but she caught it. Not just the hall, she continued, pieces falling into place. The workhouse. You were sent there too, weren't you? Discarded. Told you were worthless. Shut up, the man growled. How many others? Varela pressed. How many null-marked people did they recruit with promises of revenge? Promises that you could matter, that you could hurt the system that threw you away? Varela, Riven said quietly, what are you doing? Finding out who's really behind this. She crouched in front of the captive. You're not the mastermind. You're just angry and desperate. So who gave you direction? Who turned that anger into an attack? The man's jaw worked, then barely audible. House Merrick. Riven's expression went cold. Merrick. You're certain? The man nodded. Varela stood. Who are they? The second house, Riven said. One of the oldest families in the realm. They've been vying for the throne for generations. And they're using discarded nulls as expendable soldiers, Varela finished. People who have nothing to lose and every reason to want the system destroyed. It's a smart strategy, Senna admitted. Brutal, but smart. Riven turned to his guards. Bring me Lord Merrick, now. Your Majesty, without proof, I have 3 confessions. That's proof enough. Within the hour, Lord Merrick stood in the throne room, his expression carefully neutral. He was younger than Castor had been, maybe 40, with sharp features and cold eyes. Your Majesty, he said, bowing, I came as soon as I heard about the attack. Terrible business. Do we know who's responsible? You, Riven said flatly. Merrick's eyebrows rose. I beg your pardon? You orchestrated the attack. Used null-marked outcasts as your soldiers, and you did it because you thought the palace would be weakened after Castor's execution. That's a serious accusation. It's a fact. Riven gestured to the guards. Bring in the witnesses. The 3 captured attackers were dragged in. One by one, they identified Merrick as the man who'd recruited them, armed them, promised them gold and revenge. Merrick's composure cracked, just slightly, but enough. These men are clearly lying, he said, trying to save themselves by— Enough, Riven cut him off. I'm tired of traitors. I'm tired of games. You wanted the throne? You should have challenged me directly instead of hiding behind hired killers. And if I had, you're the Alpha King. You would have crushed me. Yes, Riven agreed. I would have, but at least you would have died with honor instead of as a coward. Merrick's face twisted with rage. You're no better than the rest of us. A king with a monster inside him and a null whore on his arm. You think you're righteous? You're just better at hiding your rot. Riven moved so fast Varela barely saw it. One moment he was standing at the throne. The next, his hand was around Merrick's throat. Call her that again, Riven said softly. I dare you. Merrick struggled, gasping, his face turning purple. Riven, Varela said quietly. He didn't let go. Riven, don't. She walked up to him, placed her hand on his arm. Through their bond, she felt his rage, white-hot and consuming. The shadow entity stirred, feeding on it. "He's not worth it," she said, "and I'm not what he called me. You know that." Slowly, Riven's grip loosened. He dropped Merrick, who collapsed coughing. "Execution at dawn," Riven said, "for treason." Merrick was dragged away, still gasping for air. The throne room emptied until only Riven, Varela, and Senna remained. "That's 2 houses down," Senna observed. "How many do you think we'll try next?" "All of them," Riven said, "until they learn the lesson or die trying. Or until we change the system that makes them think attacking is their only option," Varela added. Both Riven and Senna looked at her. "What?" she said. "You think this ends with executions? There are 5 more houses. How many traitors can you kill before you run out of nobility entirely?" "What are you suggesting?" Riven asked. "I'm suggesting we give them less reason to want you dead. Reform. Actually listen to the council instead of threatening them into submission. Show them you're not a tyrant with a monster on a leash." "I am a tyrant with a monster on a leash." "Then be a fair one." Riven studied her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled. A real smile. Small, but genuine. "You're dangerous," he said. "I'm practical." Same thing. Over the following weeks, things shifted. Riven convened the council, what was left of it, and actually let them speak. Proposals were made, some were implemented. The null-marked workers in the palace were given better conditions, real wages, paths to something other than slow death by exhaustion. The remaining noble houses watched warily, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It didn't. Varela continued her training with Senna, but now her sessions included learning to control the fire. It was harder than fighting. The flames responded to emotion, and controlling emotion while pushing her body to its limits was nearly impossible. "You're thinking too much," Senna said after Varela failed to summon fire for the 3rd time in a row. "It's not a spell. It's part of you. Just let it come." "If I just let it come, I'll burn down the palace." "Then learn to aim." Varela gritted her teeth and tried again. This time, a small flame appeared in her palm, controllable, focused. "Better," Senna said. Again. By the end of the month, Varela could summon fire at will, shape it into different forms, even extinguish it completely. It still took enormous concentration, and using it for more than a few minutes left her exhausted. But it was progress. Word spread. The Null Queen who wasn't null. The girl who'd been nothing and turned out to be something extraordinary. The whispers changed, no longer contemptuous, but cautious. Respectful, even. Varela noticed the difference one evening at a state dinner. The nobles who'd mocked her at the gala now nodded when she passed. Servants met her eyes instead of looking away. Even Hestia seemed marginally less disapproving. "You're making them nervous," Riven observed later in the privacy of his chambers. "Good," Varela said. "Nervous is better than contemptuous." He pulled her close, and she went willingly. They'd been sharing chambers for weeks now, and the initial awkwardness had faded into something almost comfortable. She slept in his bed. He held her when the nightmares came, hers or his. It didn't seem to matter. They were building something, slowly, carefully. "The seal is holding," he said against her hair. "I know, I can feel it. You'll need to reinforce it again soon." "I know that too." "Thank you." She tilted her head back to look at him. "For what?" "For not running. For staying. For—" He paused, searching for words. "For being you." Varela felt warmth bloom in her chest. Not fire this time. Something softer, more dangerous. "You're welcome," she said quietly. He kissed her. Different from the desperate kiss weeks ago. This one was careful, tender, full of things neither of them were ready to say out loud. When they broke apart, Varela saw something flicker in his eyes, something that looked like fear. "What?" she asked. "I'm falling in love with you," he said, "and that terrifies me." "Why?" "Because the entity can use it against us, against you. The stronger the bond, the more dangerous it becomes if I lose control." "Then don't lose control." "It's not that simple. It never is." She cupped his face in her hands. "But I'm not going anywhere. Whatever comes, we face it together. You're too stubborn for your own good.
You married me knowing that. Did I? He smiled slightly. I thought I was getting a quiet, obedient queen.
Shows what you know.
He laughed, and Varela felt it through their bond. Genuine happiness, light and warm, and so rare for him that it made her chest ache. I love you, she said. The words came out before she could stop them. Riven went very still. I know it's complicated, Varela continued, the words tumbling out now. I know it makes things harder, but it's true. I love you.
Your damage, your monster, your ridiculous martyrdom complex, all of it.
Varela, you don't have to say it back. I know you're scared, but I needed you to know. He kissed her again, harder this time, almost desperate. And through their bond, she felt what he couldn't quite say aloud. He loved her too. And that, Varela realized with absolute certainty, was either going to save them or destroy them both. The morning after her confession, Varela woke to find Riven already gone. Not unusual. He was always up before dawn, dealing with the endless demands of running a kingdom. What was unusual was the note on his pillow. Meeting with the remaining houses, proposing reforms. Wish me luck. Our Varela smiled and got dressed. She was halfway through breakfast when Hestia burst in, her face pale. Your Majesty, you need to come, now. Varela's stomach dropped. What happened? The council meeting, something went wrong. They ran. The council chamber was in chaos when they arrived. Guards everywhere, shouting. And in the center of it all, Riven on his knees, his hands pressed to his head, his body shaking. The black veins were back, worse than before. They crawled up his neck, across his face, pulsing with dark energy. What happened? Varela demanded. The houses rejected his proposals, Senna said, her voice tight. All of them. United Front said he was showing weakness, that he'd become too soft since marrying you. And he lost control. Not completely, not yet, but close. Varela pushed through the guards. Everyone out, now! Your Majesty, out! They fled. Varela knelt in front of Riven, gripping his shoulders. Look at me. His eyes, when they met hers, were more black than silver. I can feel it, he gasped. The entity. It's stronger, angrier. I can't. Yes, you can, Varela said firmly. We've done this before. We'll do it again. It's different this time. The rejection, the anger. It fed the shadow, made it grow. Then we make the seal grow too. She pressed her forehead to his, closing her eyes, reaching for the fire. It came easily now, flowing through her like breathing. She poured it into him, into their bond, reinforcing the seal. But Riven was right. The shadow was stronger. It fought back viciously, tearing at the new bindings as fast as she could build them. It's not working, Riven said through gritted teeth. It will. Just hold on. Varela, if I lose control here, I'll kill everyone in the palace. You need to run. Please. No. Damn it, woman. I said no. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. I'm not leaving you. Not now, not ever. So stop asking. Through their bond, she felt his love for her, bright and fierce and terrified. And she realized what she needed to do. She stopped trying to contain the shadow. Instead, she met it head on. Varela dove into Riven's soul, past the seal, past the bindings, straight into the heart of the darkness. The entity shrieked and lunged for her. She let it come. The shadow wrapped around her, trying to consume her, to tear her apart. And Varela held still and let it see what she was. Not a victim, not a weapon, not a null, or a queen or any label that had been forced on her. Just herself, scarred and stubborn and absolutely unwilling to give up. The fire inside her blazed, not attacking, just existing, and the shadow recoiled, because Varela understood something now, something fundamental. The entity fed on negative emotions, but it couldn't touch the positive ones, couldn't consume love or hope or the fierce determination that had kept her alive through years of rejection and abuse. Those things were hers, and they were stronger than any darkness. She pushed back, not with fire, but with will, with every ounce of stubbornness and love and sheer bloody-minded refusal to lose. The shadow screamed, thrashed, fought. Varela didn't flinch. And slowly, impossibly, the entity retreated. Not destroyed, but cowed.
forced back behind the seal by something it couldn't comprehend and therefore couldn't fight. Varela opened her eyes. Riven was staring at her, the black veins fading, his breathing ragged. "What did you just do?" "Loved you," she said simply. "Completely. Without fear." And it didn't know what to do with that. His hands came up to cup her face. "You're insane." "Probably. And extraordinary." "Definitely." He kissed her, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear, just love, pure and uncomplicated and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. When they finally broke apart, they were both crying. "I love you," Riven said. "I should have said it sooner, but I love you, more than anything." "I know," Varela said, smiling through tears. "I've always known." The door burst open. Kieran Montrath stood there, breathing hard. "Sorry to interrupt, but you need to hear this." He gestured behind him. "The houses. They're outside. All of them. And they're not hostile." Varela and Riven exchanged glances. They walked to the balcony overlooking the main courtyard. Below, hundreds of people had gathered. Nobles, guards, servants, even some null-marked workers from the city beyond the palace walls. And at the front, the heads of the 5 remaining houses, kneeling. "What is this?" Riven called down. Lord Tavish of House Winter stood. "An apology, Your Majesty, and an oath. We reject our earlier decision. Your reforms are wise, and more than that." He looked at Varela. "We acknowledge the Queen, not as decoration or political pawn, but as your equal, your partner, and our ruler." A roar of approval rose from the crowd. Varela's knees went weak. She gripped the balcony railing, overwhelmed. Riven took her hand, squeezing gently. Then he raised it high, presenting her to the crowd. "Your queen," he said simply. The roar became deafening. And Varela Kane, the girl who'd been called nothing, who'd been sealed and hidden and discarded, stood on the balcony of the royal palace and finally, understood what it meant to belong. The cheering didn't stop. Varela stood on the balcony, Riven's hand warm in hers, and watched as the crowd below erupted in celebration. Nobles who'd sneered at her weeks ago now bowed. Servants who'd avoided her eyes now smiled. The null-marked workers at the back of the crowd raised their fists in solidarity, and Varela felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked tight since childhood. Acceptance, recognition, belonging. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the calm before a storm. Riven must have sensed it through their bond because he squeezed her hand. "What's wrong?" "This is too easy," she murmured, quiet enough that only he could hear. "They rejected your reforms this morning. Now they're kneeling? Something doesn't add up." His eyes narrowed. "You think it's a trap?" "I think people don't change their minds this fast without a reason." Before Riven could respond, Lord Tavish called up from the courtyard. "Your Majesties, if we might speak privately, there are matters that require immediate attention." Riven glanced at Varela. She nodded. They descended to the throne room where the 5 house lords waited. Tavish, Winter's head, stood at the front, a man in his 50s with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that held too much calculation. Beside him were Lady Kess of House Thornwell, Lord Darien of House Cray, Lady Solis of House Ember, and Lord Vane of House Blackridge. The most powerful families left in the realm, all gathered in one room. Senna positioned herself near the door, her hand on her sword. Kieran stood to the side, his expression wary. Varela took her place beside Riven's throne, refusing the smaller chair that had been set up for her. If they were going to treat her as an equal, she'd stand as one. "Speak," Riven said. Lord Tavish stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we owe you both an apology. Our rejection this morning was short-sighted." "That's one word for it," Riven said coldly. "We were operating under incomplete information," Lady Kess interjected. She was younger than Tavish, sharp-featured and sharper-tongued. "We didn't understand the full scope of the threat facing the realm." Varela's skin prickled. "What threat?" The lords exchanged glances. Finally, Lord Darien spoke, a massive man with a scarred face and a voice like grinding stone. "The entity inside His Majesty isn't unique." Silence crashed down. Riven went very still. Explain. There are others, Darian continued. 7, to be exact. 7 alphas from the oldest bloodlines, each bound with a shadow entity in childhood. It was done generations ago, a ritual designed to create the perfect rulers, powerful, unkillable, eternal. But the bindings are failing, Lady Solus added, her voice soft and musical. Across all 7. The entities are waking up, getting stronger, and when they break free... She trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Apocalypse, Varela said flatly. In a word, yes. Riven's hands gripped the arms of the throne so hard the wood cracked. Why am I only hearing about this now? Because the knowledge was suppressed, Lord Vane said. He was the oldest of the group, his face lined with age and something that looked like shame. By our ancestors, the ritual was considered too dangerous, too morally questionable, so they hid the records, destroyed the evidence. Only the house heads knew, and we were forbidden to speak of it. Until now, Riven said. Until this morning, when your entity nearly broke free in the council chamber, Tavish said. We felt it, Your Majesty. All of us. Because we're bound to the other 6 through old magic. When one entity stirs, we all feel the ripple. Varela's mind raced. Where are the others? Scattered across the realm, some rule their own territories. Others are in hiding, trying to control the entities on their own. And they're all losing, Riven said. It wasn't a question. Yes. How long do we have? The lords looked at each other. Lady Kess answered, her voice grim. 3 months, maybe 4. After that, the entities will be too strong to contain. They'll break free, and when they do, they'll seek each other out. Why? Varela asked. Because together, they're not just destructive, they're transformative. 7 shadow entities, fully unleashed and united, can unmake reality itself. Tear down the veil between worlds. Bring forth something ancient and hungry that should never see daylight again. Varela felt ice slide down her spine. You're talking about the end of everything. We're talking about the end of everything, Kess confirmed. Riven stood abruptly. Then we stop it. How, Tess? Tavish asked. The original binding ritual is lost. Even if we could recreate it, we'd need the cooperation of all 7 alphas. And most of them don't even know you exist. Then we find them, Varela said. We bring them here. We figure out how to reinforce the bindings. With respect, Your Majesty, you barely know how to control your own power, Lord Vane said. The ritual that bound these entities required dozens of trained mages working in concert. You're one woman with newly awakened abilities. Then I'll learn, Varela snapped. Fast. There isn't time. Then we make time. She looked at Riven. You said love strengthens the seal. That's what worked with yours. What if that's the key? Not a magical ritual, but genuine connection, bond, love. You want to find 7 cursed alphas and make them fall in love? Kess said incredulously. I want to find 7 cursed alphas and show them they're not alone, Varela corrected. That there's another way besides fighting the darkness by themselves. The lords looked skeptical, but Riven was staring at Varela with something that looked like hope. It's insane, he said. Most good plans are. We don't have the resources to track down 7 scattered alphas in 3 months. Then we use what we have, your network, the houses. Hell, we use the null-marked workers. They move through the realm unseen. They can be our eyes and ears. Tavish frowned. You trust nulls with information this critical? I trust people who've been discarded and overlooked, Varela said sharply, because they know how to survive in the shadows. And right now, shadows are exactly where we need to look. Silence. Then Tavish slowly nodded. It could work. It will work, Varela said, because the alternative is unacceptable. The next weeks were a blur of frantic preparation. Riven mobilized his network. Spies, scouts, informants. The House Lords contributed their own resources, sending out search parties to track down the other bound alphas. And Varela worked with the null-marked community, building trust, explaining the stakes, recruiting volunteers. They found the first alpha within 10 days, a woman named Mara, who ruled a remote mountain territory. She was suspicious, hostile, and half consumed by her entity. It took 3 days of careful negotiation before she agreed to travel to the capital. The second alpha, a young man named Kyle, was easier. He was desperate for help, his entity already breaking through. Varela reinforced his seal the same way she'd reinforced Riven's, and Kyle wept with relief. The third, fourth, and fifth came within weeks of each other, each one different, each one struggling, each one convinced they were fighting alone. Varela showed them they weren't, but the last two proved harder to find. 6 weeks in, with time running short, Varela stood in the war room surrounded by maps and reports. Raven was beside her, Senna across the table. The 5 House Lords were present, along with Mara, Kyle, and the other 3 rescued alphas, Theron, Lysa, and Dane. "We're missing 2, Riven said, his finger tapping the map. "Whoever they are, they've gone completely dark." "Or they're dead," Mara said bluntly. "Their entities could have already consumed them." "Then we'd feel it," Lysa argued. She was the youngest of the group, barely 20, with silver eyes that matched Riven's. "The binding connects all 7. If one died, the others would destabilize." "Unless they didn't die," Varela said slowly. "Unless they found a way to fully contain the entity, to suppress it so completely that even the binding doesn't register." Everyone turned to look at her. "That's not possible," Theron said. "The entities can't be suppressed without destroying the host." "What if the host isn't being destroyed? What if they're in stasis, sleeping?" Riven's eyes widened. "The frost vaults." "The what?" Varela asked. "Ancient prisons in the northern wastes," Senna explained. "Built to hold the unkillable. Criminals, monsters, things that couldn't be executed but couldn't be allowed to remain free. They're put in magical stasis and sealed away." "If someone knew they were becoming a threat," Riven said, following the logic, "and they had the resources, they could have themselves imprisoned, voluntarily." "That's a hell of a sacrifice," Mara said. "It's survival," Varela countered. "If I thought I was going to destroy everything I loved, I'd lock myself away too." Lord Tavish pulled out a different map, this one showing the northern territories. "The vaults are here, buried under ice and protected by wards. No one's accessed them in decades." "Then we break in," Varela said. "The wards are designed to keep things in, not out," Kess pointed out, "but they're still formidable, and the journey alone will take weeks." "We don't have weeks," Kyle said quietly. "My entity is already pushing against the seal again. Even with the reinforcement, it's getting stronger." The others nodded. They were all feeling it, the entities growing restless, hungry, aware that their time was coming. "Then we move fast," Varela said. "Take a small team, get in, find the last 2 alphas, get out." "I'm going," Riven said immediately. "So am I," Senna added. "And me," Mara said. "If there's fighting involved, you'll want someone who knows how to use a blade." Varela looked around the room. "The rest of you stay here. Keep the seals reinforced. If something happens to us, you'll need to hold the line." They left at dawn. The journey north was brutal. The landscape shifted from forest to tundra to endless ice fields. The cold was merciless, biting through layers of clothing and sinking into bones. Twice they were attacked by creatures drawn to the entity's power, twisted, malformed things that had to be burned away with Varela's fire. 10 days after leaving the capital, they reached the frost vaults. The entrance was a massive door carved into the side of a glacier, covered in runes that pulsed with pale blue light. The air around it felt wrong, too still, too quiet, like the world itself was holding its breath. "This is it," Senna said. Varela approached the door, studying the wards. They were old magic, complex and layered. Breaking them would take time they didn't have. "Can you open it?" Riven asked. "Maybe." Varela placed her hands on the ice, letting fire flow into the runes. Not burning, but probing, testing. The wards resisted at first, then slowly began to shift. It took an hour of careful work before the door groaned and swung open, revealing a tunnel descending into darkness. They descended. The vaults were a labyrinth of ice and stone, each cell sealed with the same blue glowing wards. Most were empty. Some held frozen figures, criminals from centuries past, their faces locked in eternal stillness. And at the very bottom, in the deepest chamber, they found them. 2 cells, 2 figures. The first was a woman, tall and regal even in stasis, with frost clinging to her dark skin. The second was a man, younger, his face peaceful in sleep. That's them, Mara breathed. I can feel it. The entities. Varela approached the woman's cell first. The wards here were different, not designed to imprison, but to preserve, protect. She put herself here willingly, Varela said. Sealed herself away to keep the entity contained.
How do we wake her without releasing the entity? Riven asked. Carefully, Varela studied the wards, then reached for the bond she shared with Riven. Through it, she could feel his entity, contained and controlled. She used that feeling as a template, shaping her fire to match the seal's resonance. Slowly, she began to dismantle the wards. The ice cracked. The woman's eyes opened, golden, bright, and filled with centuries of exhaustion. Who? She started, her voice rough from disuse. Friends, Varela said quickly, we're here to help. Help? The woman laughed bitterly. I've been sealed for 200 years. There is no help. There is now, Riven said, stepping forward. We found a way to reinforce the bindings, all 7 of us, working together. The woman's eyes widened. All 7? The others are alive? Alive and waiting, Varela confirmed. But we need you, both of you. She gestured to the second cell. The woman looked at the sleeping man and something painful crossed her face. He's my brother. We sealed ourselves together when the entities became too strong. Then we wake him too, Varela said. It took another hour to carefully dismantle the second cell's wards. The man, his name was Elias, Varela learned, woke slowly, confusion giving way to cautious hope as they explained the situation. You're saying there's a way to control this? Elias asked. Permanently? Not permanently, Varela admitted. The seals will need maintenance, but with all 7 of you connected, supporting each other, it's sustainable. The woman, her name was Nyla, studied Varela closely. You're not one of us. You don't have an entity. No, but I have this. Varela let fire dance across her palm. And I have him. She nodded toward Riven. And together, we've managed to keep the darkness at bay. Nyla's expression softened. Love. Love, Varela confirmed. The original binders believed love was a weakness, Elias said quietly. That's why they chose children for the ritual. Before we could form deep attachments, they thought isolation would make us stronger. They were wrong, Riven said. Isolation nearly destroyed us. Connection saved us. Nyla looked at her brother. Some silent communication passed between them. Then she nodded. We'll come, she said. But if this fails, if the entities break free, they won't, Varela said with more confidence than she felt. We won't let them. The journey back to the capital took 8 days. They pushed hard, knowing time was running out. Varela could feel it through the bond, Riven's entity growing restless, straining against the seal. The others were feeling it too. They arrived to find the palace in controlled chaos. Kael met them at the gates, his face pale. You're just in time. The entities, they know. They know we're gathering, and they're fighting back. In the throne room, the other alphas were gathered, all of them visibly struggling. Theron's hands shook. Lisa's eyes had gone dark. Dane was pacing like a caged animal. We need to do this now, Mara said, before they break through. Varela looked at Riven. Are you ready? No, but we're doing it anyway. They arranged themselves in a circle, all 7 alphas, with Varela at the center. The House Lords watched from the edges of the room, along with Senna, Kieran, and Hestia. Varela closed her eyes, reaching for the fire. It came instantly, stronger than ever before. She let it flow outward, connecting to each alpha in turn. Through the bond with Riven, she felt his entity. Through him, she felt the others, 7 shadow entities, ancient and hungry, and so tired of being caged. I'm not here to fight you, she said, speaking directly to the darkness. I'm here to offer a deal. The entities stirred, curious. You were bound against your will, forced into hosts who didn't want you, used as weapons and tools and power sources. I understand why you're angry. The shadows pressed closer. But destroying everything won't free you. It'll just leave you alone in the void. Is that what you want? Eternal emptiness? Silence. Then slowly, a response. Not words, but feelings. Loneliness. Rage. Desperation.
I can give you something better, Varela said. Not freedom. I can't do that. But partnership. Cooperation. A way to exist that doesn't require consuming your hosts. The entities hesitated. You've spent centuries fighting them, Varela continued. What if you stopped fighting? What if you worked together instead? One of the entities, Riven's, she thought, pushed forward. It showed her an image. The ritual, the binding, the pain. Children screaming as darkness was forced into their souls.
I know, Varela said softly, and I'm sorry. What was done to you was wrong. But the people you're bonded to now, they're not responsible. They're just trying to survive, same as you. More images. The alphas as children, frightened and alone. The years of struggle. The slow descent into despair. They understand suffering, Varela said. They understand being trapped. You're not as different as you think. The entities pulled back, considering. Varela took a breath and made her offer.
I can rebuild the seals. Make them flexible instead of rigid. Give you room to exist without being completely caged. But you have to agree to limits. No killing. No destruction. No consuming your hosts. Long silence. Then, slowly, one by one, the entities agreed. Varela got to work. She wove fire through the bonds, connecting all 7 alphas, all 7 entities. Instead of separate prisons, she built a network, a web of power that distributed the strain, allowed the entities to touch each other without merging, gave them the connection they craved without the destruction. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done. Her body screamed, her mind fractured under the weight of 7 consciousnesses pressing against hers. Blood dripped from her nose. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the threads of power together. But she didn't stop. She felt Riven trying to pull her back, felt his fear that she was burning herself out. But she couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close. The final seal clicked into place. The entities settled, not subdued, but content. For the first time in centuries, they weren't fighting, weren't raging, they were just existing. Varela collapsed. She woke in Riven's arms, in their chambers, with sunlight streaming through the windows. How long? She croaked. 2 days, he said, his voice rough. You've been unconscious for 2 days. The others? Fine. Better than fine. The seals are holding. The entities are calm. Varela tried to sit up. Her body protested violently. Don't, Riven said, gently pushing her back down. You nearly killed yourself. But I didn't. No, you didn't. He brushed hair from her face. You saved us. All of us. We saved each other, Varela corrected. That's how this works. He kissed her forehead. Rest. The realm will still be here when you wake up. But Varela couldn't rest. Not yet. What happened while I was out? The houses? The council? They've pledged full support. All of them. Your reforms are being implemented across the realm. The null-marked are being given opportunities, protections. The claiming halls are being restructured. And the other alphas? Staying. Most of them, anyway. Nyla and Elias are returning north to rebuild their territories, but they'll come back regularly to reinforce the network. Mara's taking over House Winter. Lord Tavish is stepping down. Kale's being trained as a diplomat. Theron, Lysa, and Dane are forming a sort of task force, handling threats that require entity-level power. Varela smiled. We did it. You did it. We, she insisted. 3 weeks later, Varela stood in the throne room, fully recovered, wearing a gown of deep crimson that matched the fire she no longer bothered to hide. Riven sat on his throne, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. The room was packed. All 7 alphas, the 5 house lords, representatives from every corner of the realm. And standing at the very front, a delegation of null-marked workers led by a young woman Varela recognized from the claiming hall. Lord Tavish stepped forward. Your Majesties, we are gathered to witness the formal coronation of Queen Varela Kane. Varela blinked. I'm already queen. You were claimed as queen, Tavish corrected. This makes it official, recognized by every house, every territory, every citizen of the realm. A crown was brought forward, not the traditional heavy gold monstrosity, but something new, forged from silver and steel, set with 7 gems representing the 7 bound alphas, and wreathed in a design that looked like flames.
Riven stood and took the crown. "Kneel," he said softly. Varela knelt. "Varela Kane," Riven said, his voice carrying through the hall. "You came to us as nothing. You were told you had no power, no value, no place in this world. Every institution designed to define you said you were empty." He placed the crown on her head. "They were wrong. You are fire. You are strength. You are the force that held back the darkness and rewrote the rules. You are the queen this realm needs, not because you were born to it, but because you earned it." Varela stood, and the room erupted in cheers. But she wasn't done. She turned to face the crowd, raising her hand for silence. When the room quieted, she spoke. "I accept this crown, but not for myself. I accept it for every person in this realm who was told they were worthless, every Knoll who was branded and discarded, every outcast who was given no choice but the workhouse or death." She looked directly at the Knoll-marked delegation. "You're not empty. You never were. The system that labeled you was broken, not you. And that system ends today." She turned to the House Lords. "I want the claiming halls abolished, completely. No more forced bonds. No more treating people like commodities." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Instead, we create opportunities. Education, training, paths to power that don't require an alpha's claim. We rebuild this realm into something better." "Your Majesty," Lord Vane said carefully, "that's a radical change. It will take years to implement." "Then we start now," Varela said. "We've already done the impossible. We bound 7 entities, prevented the apocalypse, and united the houses. Compared to that, social reform should be easy." Riven stood beside her. "The Queen has spoken. Any objections?" Silence. Then slowly, the House Lords knelt. The crowd followed. And Varela Kane, the girl who'd been nothing, stood before her realm and knew with absolute certainty that she'd finally found her place. 6 months later, Varela stood in the gardens, one hand resting on her swollen belly. The pregnancy had been unexpected. Impossible, according to the healers. Knoll-marked women weren't supposed to be able to conceive. But Varela had stopped believing in supposed to a long time ago. Riven found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Fat, tired, happy." He laughed and pressed a kiss to her neck. "The council wants to know if we've chosen names." "Tell the council to mind their own business." "I did. They're very persistent." Varela turned in his arms. "Do you ever regret it, choosing me?" "Every day," he said seriously, then smiled. "I regret that I didn't do it sooner." She hit his arm. "Idiot. You're idiot." Unfortunately. They stood together in the garden, watching the sun set over the capital. In the distance, Varela could see the changes taking shape, new buildings rising where the claiming halls had been torn down, schools opening, opportunities spreading. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. There was still resistance, still people who clung to the old ways. But it was better. And it would keep getting better. Varela felt a kick from inside her belly and smiled. "She's strong," Riven said, his hand joining hers. "She? Call it a hunch." "Well, your hunches are usually right." 3 months later, Varela gave birth to a daughter with silver eyes and a cry that shook the palace walls. They named her Ember. And when she was 3 days old, lying in her cradle and glowing faintly with inner fire, Varela leaned over and whispered, "You're going to change everything, little one, just like your mother did. But you'll do it your way. And no one will ever tell you that you're nothing." The baby's eyes opened, bright and aware, and Varela swore she saw understanding there. Outside, the realm was transforming. The 7 alphas maintained their network, keeping the entities in check. The houses worked together instead of against each other. The Knoll-marked found new paths, new purposes, new lives. And in the palace, a former nothing, who'd become everything, held her daughter close and thought about the girl she'd been in that claiming hall. Invisible, discarded, convinced she had no future. If she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, the pain and the terror and the impossible choices, would she? Varela didn't know. But she knew this. She wouldn't change a single moment. Because every rejection, every scar, every time she'd been told she was worthless had led her here. To a throne she'd earned. To a love she'd fought for.
to a daughter who would never ever be made to feel small. Varela Kane had been called null, empty, nothing. She'd proven them all wrong, and she was just getting started.